My name is Frances and I'm the Access and Inclusion Consultancy Manager at Getaboutable. If you haven't heard, this year's conference will be held in Melbourne on the 27th of August at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. Tickets are now on sale on our website. To start, I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that I'm speaking to you from today, the Ngunnawal people, and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which each of you are calling in from today. I invite you to join in this acknowledgement by entering the name of the traditional custodians of the land you are joining from in the chat. I would like to pay my respects to elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present here today. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Something Getaboutable also likes to do, especially when we're talking about accessibility, is to acknowledge our leaders in the disability rights movement who have and still are paving the way for equity. We have attendees today joining us from human resources departments and a range of sectors, for example, tourism, both in Australia and overseas, leisure, education, retail, government, disability services and advocacy, and community sectors. A DAPE is a universal tool that can be adopted across multiple sectors and industries to engage stakeholders in building capacity to be more accessible and inclusive of people with disability in all their diversity and intersecting identities. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, asexual plus, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, culturally and linguistically diverse. Joining me today is Paula Camello from the governance team at Tura Women's Inc., a community organisation that has worked with Getaboutable to develop their DAPE and will share their insights into their experience and their motivations to develop a DAPE with you all today for your learnings. So to start with, what is access? Accessibility isn't just ensuring people can physically access your premise. It means your services and your facilities, including information, are also accessible. So in the main, access is the physical infrastructure of your business or community group or service, such as ramps, accessible bathrooms, hearing loops, or quiet rooms. Access can also be improved through the temporary changes, for example, moving furniture in a hotel room for people with vision or mobility difficulties. Often people have a bit of a misconception of the disability community, and we like to remind people that if they don't know, that people who mobilise in a wheelchair are 8% of the disability community, and around 40 to 50% are actually neurodivergent. Inclusion is having a respectful and welcoming attitude towards the people with disability who approach your business or community service as a potential or actual customer or employees. Inclusion is a willingness to consider ways that people with disabilities can be included, even if your business isn't fully accessible. Although accessible and inclusive are not interchangeable, they are very closely related concepts. The more accessible your organisation, service or business is, the wider the range of people who can meaningfully and fully participate. No matter how accessible your organisation, service or business is, if it doesn't feel inclusive and welcoming, that may be a barrier to access, particularly for people who have hidden disabilities, such as mental health conditions. What is a disability action and inclusion plan? It's a strategic blueprint for making your business, group or organisation more inclusive of people with disabilities and addressing current barriers that reduce or prevent their equal access and participation as visitors, customers, clients and staff members. It translates your commitment to inclusivity into a set of objectives and actions with timelines and notes on who is responsible for each part of the implementation aimed at achieving desired outcomes. DAPEs also provide a framework for the provision of reasonable adjustments and responding to the diverse needs of people with disability, assisting organisations to meet their obligations under the Disability Discrimination Act 1992.
Frances, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you for a second here. Hi, everyone. I'm Manon. I'm from Get Aboutable.
Yes.
Your sound has been coming a little bit clunky. I suspect that might be because you have a lot going on your computer at the moment. Hi, everyone. We tested Frances' sound before she came on.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want, I could share the presentation for you. And try to have you with less things.
That sounds like it would have less impost. So yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Manon, for your help. So continuing on about what a disability action and inclusion plan is, it's a living document that helps you and your team to keep action on inclusion front of mind. It should be consulted and reviewed regularly and updated, just like other active organisational planning tools. Developing a DAPE also enables you to share your vision, commitment and progress with staff, customers, members and key stakeholders to engage their support and keep them informed. It will also strengthen grant funding and awards applications that focus on accessibility and inclusion. Next slide, thanks. Why should you develop a disability action and inclusion plan? Well, it increases business by 20%. Approximately 1.6 people have a disability in Australia, and 1 in 3 people are close to a person with a disability. Research from Deloitte Access Economics has estimated that for every $1 invested into accessible environments, $13 was generated into return revenue. It also leads to more opportunities to employ people with disability, and it reduces the likelihood of discrimination and ensures people with disability are treated as equals. As Dr. Ben Gauntlett, Disability Discrimination Commissioner, who finished up in that role in June 2023, stated, organisations, businesses and providers of goods and services entering into action plans under the Disability Discrimination Act 1992 present a compelling message to the community that they view people with disability as equals. Having a well-publicised and thoroughly prepared DAPE reduces the likelihood of discrimination and ensures people with disability are treated as equals. Improving access and inclusion benefits a range of community members, in addition to people with disabilities. For example, aged people, people with temporary injuries, families with prams, people with low literacy. On average, customers with disability bring 3 other customers with them to a business that includes them. People with disability, their families and their friends are more likely to become return customers and brand advocates when discovering accessible and inclusive businesses and organisations. Employees with disability take fewer days off, stay in the job longer and have fewer workplace accidents than other employees, and their presence in a workplace improves organisational culture, morale is higher, there is greater collaboration and overall productivity is lifted. It also leads to having higher overall staff and volunteer retention, as employees prefer to work in organisations that have a positive social impact. Having a DAPE also enhances your reputation with people who don't have a disability, making it more attractive to them as customers, participants, employees and volunteers. These people are also actively promoting your business through their networks. A DAPE also provides increased opportunities for people with disability to more fully participate in their community. This all adds up to, if you're one of the 2.4 million businesses currently operating in Australia and you are not providing people with disabilities equitable access to your goods and services, you are missing out on an enormous opportunity, one that could only potentially increase your business revenue by more than 20%. Next slide, please, Manon. How to develop a disability action and inclusion plan. So it's important to focus on progress, not perfection. Just make a start. Begin with the easy wins. Contemplate your medium to long-term improvements. Accessibility improvements don't have to be expensive and can support wider inclusion. Making accessibility and inclusion a pillar of your organisation, service or business is a multi-layered process with both short and long-term goals. Website accessibility information. If you aren't telling people about what you already have, you aren't leveraging the full benefits for your business and your customers. People with disabilities need information that enables them to pre-plan. It's a daily reality of people with disabilities. If they don't pre-plan, they risk turning up only to find out that they can't take part. Listing the accessibility features enables people with disability to confidently engage with businesses, organisations, events, knowing that accessibility features will be met without having hours spent researching to find out what is in place. If the accessibility features are communicated, they're more likely to get business from people with disabilities, carers and families and their friends. Getaboutable Consultancy can work with you to develop a disability action and inclusion plan that gives you a roadmap specifically tailored to your business for navigating the first steps of this journey and embedding consideration of accessibility and inclusion into your ongoing business planning and development. Next slide, please, Manon. So how to develop a disability action and inclusion plan? Well, the first step is conducting a review. It's important to establish your baseline and become aware of what accessibility and inclusion you have in place through the eyes of people with disability. As a disability community say, nothing about us without us. You need a clear picture of what currently is and isn't accessible about your organisation or business in order to provide good accessibility information to customers and to work strategically towards making change. The best way to get the picture of what currently is and isn't accessible and inclusive is to get to know your organisation or business through the eyes of people with lived experience of disability. You can do this directly by consulting with people with lived experience in your networks, or you can work with access and inclusion consultancies like Getaboutable to conduct a review. You also need to consult representatives from the different user groups that engage with your organisation. For instance, staff, customers, members, participants, volunteers, children, teens, adults, including seniors. At the end of your Start Where You Are review, you will have a report that identifies a range of opportunities to improve accessibility and inclusion, including some easy wins you can get started on right away. It will include a comprehensive accessibility information that is ready to be shared with customers. What you need to do is reflect on whether people with disabilities access your premises, goods or services, and if you have gained feedback from user experiences to build on improvements. We've got some free resources that you can access, and I'll share the link when Paula is talking. But the first is a review matrix. So next slide, please, Manon. In the review matrix, it looks at the intersection between the full spectrum of accessibility requirements, so hidden disabilities, hearing, vision, neurodiversity, mobility, and the key aspects of your organisation. So physical infrastructure and equipment, information and communication, human resources, policies and practice, customer, participant and staff experience. So within the physical infrastructure and equipment section, features like a step-free access entrance, accessible bathroom or a hearing loop, improve accessibility and open your business or organisation to more people. In the information and communication section, good accessibility information is a key enabler of access and inclusion. For example, your website is usually the first point of contact people with disability will have with your organisation. Are you providing clear information about your current accessibility there? In the human resources section, participants, staff and volunteers, the training awareness and disability confidence of staff volunteers can also make the difference between exclusion and inclusion, and they may have lived experience of disability to contribute to your knowledge base. In the policies and practice section, measures like like having a companion card affiliate, having a system for handling inquiries about accessibility, or offering quiet hours are some suggestions. Customer participant and staff volunteer experience. These are the key roles in which your organisation and each provides a different perspective on accessibility and inclusion. Their experience is the product of all the factors noted above, so it's a particularly sensitive lens for identifying strengths and gaps. Next slide, please, Manon. So this is what the template looks like that I was just verbally talking you through. Next slide, please, Manon. How to develop a disability action plan. So after you've conducted those focus groups and had some conversations across your organisation or business, you need to analyse your findings. Are there common themes that emerge? Are there longer-term outcomes you could start laying the groundwork for? The review analysis will help you set effective date objectives and provide valuable supporting evidence to include in the plan. Get Accountable can be involved in the focus groups to gather this information. Once feedback and data have been collected, it's important to summarise the findings and look at the bigger picture to identify opportunities for improving accessibility and inclusion. So, Paula, can you share with us first step of developing a date?
Thanks, Frances. Yes, I certainly can. Just a small introduction. Paula Camillo from TURA. I'm the governance manager here. TURA is an organisation that works with women escaping domestic violence, homelessness, and we have a couple of alcohol and drug programs. So we have quite a diverse client group that comes to our organisation. I suppose our motivation for having a disability inclusion action plan is that we just wanted to make sure that the work that we do and the infrastructure that we have is not disadvantaging people who are in crisis. So we have I think, an obligation to ensure that when people do come to us, that we are limiting any barriers that they're facing coming to our organisation when they're already in crisis, and a lot of them come to us from quite traumatic experiences. So we started our action plan journey looking at our stakeholders, our clients, our staff, and our board. We had a number of different ways we engaged with those groups. We had surveys that went out to all of those groups. We had a number of meetings with staff at staff meetings, and we also had a number of meetings that were conducted with our clients. One of the challenges that we found is that as we are a crisis and transitional service, particularly our client cohort, the client cohort we might have in, say, January might be a different client cohort that we have in, say, June. So it was really important for us to not only understand the issues that client space general, but we really heavily relied on the knowledge of our staff who see that transition of the client cohorts that come across as well. So that is how we gathered all of our information. And then we had Get Aboutable and Women with Disabilities ACT assist us in collating that information in preparation for an all-staff, all-organisation session that we had that went through that table that Frances had put up before.
Seems we've lost Frances for a second
Hi,
here.
Frances, she's frozen.
Paula, I'll take the opportunity to ask you a question that came up in the chat.
Yes,
someone asked a bit more details about your organization and Tora, and what you are doing in your wonderful organization. Sure.
So we have a couple of areas that we work. So we are a women's organisation. We have a domestic violence and homelessness service. So we have a number of crisis and transitional properties where we work with women and women who come with their families, their children, supporting them initially through that crisis phase, and then into a transitional phase to assist them find more permanent accommodation. A lot of our clients come with quite complex backgrounds, so it can really range between 3 months to 12 months transitional period to get them into a more stable and safe environment. We also have a drug and alcohol rehabilitation residential centre, and that is in the community. And we also do a number of day programs for our substance abuse programs. We also work with women exiting prisons and assisting them with finding secure and permanent accommodation. So yeah, that's our service.
I hope this answers the first question. Look, Frances, I'm hoping we'll be back in a second. I believe she's run into some technical issues, so apology for that. Lucky for you, we've worked on the session together, so I'm gonna step in. So what have you learned specifically from that all staff focus group? Because what Frances mentioned was Get Aboutable can work with organizations on that step so that we can gather information. And we've worked specifically with you with an all staff meeting where everyone was around and we had an opportunity to work together. So we were wondering what were your takeaways from this, how the session worked for you.
Yeah, I think it was really good having Get Aboutable and a representative from women with disabilities in the room. I think that just enabled a focus on some of the discussions that arose. And I think it was also an opportunity for some education in the room. And I think probably a takeaway from that is that I think if we were to do that again, we would probably have a disability awareness session before we had that roundtable kind of open discussion. It was great that there was lots of discussion and an openness in the room, but I think sometimes that educational piece took away from actually getting to some nitty gritty in terms of some objectives that we could put in place.
Thank you very much. Apologies, everyone. So I assume you've had an opportunity to share with everyone about your participation in step 1. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you.
So Manon, if you could share the slide that begins with step 2 on how to develop a disability action and inclusion plan, please. So step 2 involves identifying your DAPE objectives, actions and desired outcomes. It's about prioritising the most achievable objectives that you have the resources to pursue at this time. Include the desired outcomes in the plan as an important reference point to make sure that the actions you commit to be well targeted and lead to effective change. So when we're talking about achievable, it's not about becoming fully accessible, which is an unrealistic objective. For most businesses and organisations, it's about working on what can be achieved within the context of your business or organisations. It's okay to work in small, gradual steps. They will all add up over time. And also, it's important to be impactful. So you want to make sure that the outcomes you are pursuing will make a positive difference for people with disability. So you need to prioritise the most impactful and achievable objectives that you have those resources, as I've already outlined. Next slide, please, Manon. So this next free resource that's available through the link that I shared in the chat is actually the resource that is the Disability Action Inclusion Plan template. So you can see there that it lists objectives, actions, outcomes, performance indicators, and who will action and how, and the deadline. So when it comes to objectives, you need to describe a high-level goal that will be progressed throughout the DAPE. When it comes to an action, you outline the specific action that will be undertaken to achieve the DAPE objectives. When it comes to outcomes, you describe the success of the objective will look like for people with disabilities. The performance indicators will outline how success will be measured, specific to the action and measurable. In relation to who will action or how, list the individuals or departments that will lead, support, implementation. And within deadline section, note when the actions will be completed or reviewed. So Paula, would you like to share with everyone where Tura Women's Inc. is in relation to step 2 of your DAPE development?
Thank you, Frances. So part of the process which we engaged Getaboutable with was to assist us in pulling together all the information that came out of all of the feedback that was received, as well as the all-staff session that we had, the brainstorming session. They then provided an overview of all of the things that came out into the template that you're seeing on the screen. Then we have started some discussion around what our priorities are and what we can actually influence. I think that was a really important message that came out of the session that we had. For example, many of the properties, well, most of the properties that we have in which we can house the women and children are not owned by us. They're not owned by Tura. Most of them are in fact owned by government. So the government provide us with the properties to house women. So what we need to be looking at is what is our sphere of influence there, and what we can actually do within those properties within the scope of the work and the contracts that we have. So those kind of discussions have started, including the crisis and transitional element of our service. Also makes it a little bit difficult to understand how to make sure that we get the most impact for the most people, and what objectives and actions that we need to be implementing. So what we have enlisted again, the assistance of Getaboutable to actually come along to a planning day. So Tura has we generally do with our strategic and annual planning is that we have a full day where we look at diversity and inclusion across the board to inform our strategic and annual planning. And one of those sessions will be with Get Aboutable to go through the findings and the objectives that they have listed. And we will go through that with staff to identify where they feel the priorities are for us and what we can actually influence with the resources and within the funding constraints that we have.
Great. Thanks so much, Paula.
Thank you.
So moving on to the third step, it involves going live with your DAPE. So could you put that slide up, please, Manon? Just remember that your Disability Action Inclusion Plan is meant to be a living document. So every few years, it will need a refresh. So nominate a time frame for a renewal of the plan. So Paula, would you like to share with everyone, we know that you've shared just now that you're not up to this stage, but what are your thoughts about plans and thinking about this third and final stage of developing your Disability Action Inclusion Plan?
Yeah, so along with our, number of other plans that we have, along with our, say, we also have a RAP and other plans that we're looking at developing. We do look at all of those plans as a living, evolving document, because what we can do today or plan today, we might not be able to do or plan, in 6 to 12 months' time, or we might have the opportunity to have some funds funneled or into particular things, or have an opportunity to look at small grants to assist in some of the actions. We have a inclusion diversity and inclusion committee made up of staff members and stakeholders, and these plans are managed and given life through those committees, and there's constant communication and between all staff, board members and stakeholders and clients to make sure that what we're doing is still on track, and that it still is affirming what we're trying to achieve through these plans. So that would be the process that we'll be going through with this plan as well.
Great, wonderful, thanks. So Manon, if you would like to put the final slide up, please. We're going to throw it open to questions and discussion. If I can, what I'll do is go back through the chat just to double check whether we've talking through, I can see a comment by Adrian, who's on the Get Aboutable team. Having sat in on the all staff focus group, I was impressed by how much TOURA staff were already doing to accommodate people with disability. Would you like to speak to that comment, Adrienne?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I think it might have been a bit of a revelation to TOURA's managers as well, to hear some of the staff sharing, what they'd done to really support clients in, often in situations where they didn't have a lot of infrastructure and things to, not ideal circumstances to, get people to appointments and things like that. But it showed that their staff were really, really dedicated to, doing the best they could for clients. And I think, it was really heartening to see that attitude that was already there. And I think that also one of the things that impressed me was that the staff started to problem solve during that session, and bringing because Toura's got a number of different branches, getting everyone in the room together, it became evident as some people talked about, issues in their area of the organisation. Some other staff, I remember from counselling, they recognised that they would actually be able to, come in and support the people in this other branch that were having some issues related to accommodating people with disability. And I think some of the other people who didn't have disability were, there was a bit of conflict about some of the shared duties, I think, in that residence. So yeah, there was that meeting itself started to really sow the seeds for, I think, ongoing collaboration. So hopefully, Paula, that's the ball's kept rolling from there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that it has, you do, when you have an organisation that does have those branches, there can tend to be we do our job and they do it really well, and we have this team over here and they do it really well. And I think having people in the room who were discussing some of the complexities or the issues that they were facing, having all of the organisation pretty much in one room, they were able to see that other parts of the area could assist, or that they'd maybe come across something like that before, and were able to point them in the right direction or give them some resources. So that way of thinking and way of working is certainly something that is a priority for us, because that is one of the ways that we can assist people with disability is to have that one approach to working with a client, regardless of what area they are in. So yeah.
Thanks, Paula. That's wonderful discussion and unpacking further of the process and some of the complexities. We've had a question from Rita. Understanding it will depend on the size and complexity of an organisation or business. In your experience, how much time is required to research and complete a DAPE? So, Rita, really, I don't think there is a set time. Often we're working across many sectors and business types and community groups, as we're talking about. And so all of those businesses and community groups and services still have to be operational for their core services and business. It is really important to do that. And you can hear, maybe Paula, it'd be beneficial to hear how long has it been from the period when you started the review and you're at the stage where you're at the stage of pulling together from step 1 to step 2. So you haven't completed step 2. So that might give an indicator. And you've shared a little bit about the size of your business and the type of your organisation.
I think we started in October. I wasn't involved in the beginnings, so I think it was around October last year where we went out to consultation and went out to board and started speaking with clients. I suppose and I wouldn't see it as a delay, but it's more of a strategic placement of the further discussions, is because we're about to go into a new strategic planning cycle, and we wanted to ensure that staff and that client voice had been afforded the right opportunity within those processes. And so we're doing that in March, and so we would assume that from that we would probably have a final document for our board to sign off probably in April.
Thank you so much, Paula. And Adrian has made a comment in the chat. For some organisations, the first plan might only involve one objective, which is to learn more about the accessibility and inclusivity of the business and go from there. Rita, does that answer your question, or would you like to put your camera on and highlight further points or expand on your question and introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone. I don't know, can you see me? I'm not normally in Zoom, I'm normally in Teams. So yeah, look, I was really interested from the point of view of our stakeholders, which are small tourism businesses, the majority being micro and small, and obviously a commitment, a time commitment is required, and yeah, so to be able to encourage businesses, I was just wanting to have an understanding of how long it might take. Obviously, the bigger the organisation, the more complex, the more divisions or different arms of operation, the more complex it's going to be, because there's more stakeholder consultation to be undertaken. But for, you know, an owner-operator, two-person B&B, perhaps not so complex, and it could be achieved in, you know, under 6 months, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I recognise that every case is going to be different.
Yeah, absolutely, Rita. But I think, you know, I think Adrian makes a really good point. For it not to be overwhelming, it's about starting where you are and what the doable space is, rather than seeing this as an obligatory process that is going to be burdensome. We want it to add value, so you can start with one objective only in your plan. And that might be, we really don't understand access and inclusion. So let's try and learn about that, as Adrian suggests, and that's where you start. And so your living document evolves from there, so that, you know, when you go to review that, okay, we have a bit more understanding as a whole of organisation and everybody who is connected to that organisation or that business. We understand that a little bit more and how we should be doing that directly in our everyday practice. So let's think about what next step we're going to take. What objectives should we continue to build in our action plan? Does that sound, Rita?
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure. We've had a point from Joanne. We have a tourism attraction and we are trying to upgrade, but the space we occupy is governed by a local government, a local council that are not necessarily on board with accessibility. We are doing what we can, but we want to do more. Thoughts? So, Joanne, if you're comfortable to join with your camera, but if you're not, that's okay. You could just put in the chat. It might be beneficial to know which jurisdiction you're talking about, because Get Aboutable does work across the country, and we do have some people from overseas as well. So I'm not sure which state or territory you might be talking about. Okay, maybe there's a issue with Joanne's connection if we're not getting a response at this stage. Just to explain, when it comes to disability action plans, if you're government, as a local government authority yourself, they are generally legislatively required to have a disability action inclusion plan. So but it does depend. I've learnt, as I said at the beginning, and you can see from my background on Ngunnawal country, so I'm in Canberra. I've recently learnt, as I understand it from the ACT government, that they don't have a DAPE themselves. So it is a bit different across the country, but I would seek to see what is in their disability action inclusion plan if you're in a local government area where they do have them, because then you can seek to influence, as you're seeking to do, in line with the commitments that they make in that disability action inclusion plan, because that's what they're publicly saying that they support, and what they want to drive in terms of their constituency going forward. Does that assist with your question at all, Joanne, if you are on the line and can hear me? Maybe Joanne needed to go. We've had a question from Ange. What sort of costs are involved for assistance with the date from your organisation? We're happy to take that offline, Ange. Not sure if you saw the slide with our address, but I'll put that in the chat, so that it's really dependent on whether you're wanting us to come on site and what that may involve, and where our staff are. So if you're happy to make contact with us via email, we can unpack that directly with the specific nature. No worries at all around the connection, Joanne. I was clearly having some tech issues myself. The whole system bumped me off. So I really appreciate everyone persisting with any tech issues that you are experiencing. We've had a question from Olivia. Is there a standard or acceptable rate for consulting people with lived experience? Well, I'm not sure how much everybody knows about Getaboutable, but we are largely a team of people with lived experience of disability. So either we have a disability ourselves or we have a family member who has a disability. So that is part of our unique consulting services. Although there are consulting services out there that do have people with lived experience of disability, we have quite the diversity of most disability types across our staff team. So in relation to an acceptable rate for consulting with people with lived experience, we do also, sometimes people are just not connected to people with disability to be able to ask, what is your feedback around our organisation? So we can potentially connect you to people with disability as a focus group who might be able to experience your operation and provide you with some lived experience feedback. So that would once again be part of our quoting, which is quite unique to what you're seeking. So once again, if you email us, Olivia, on the consulting email that Manon has put in the chat, we can unpack that directly. So we've had another question from the Australian Assistance Animals Travel Guide. Can we ensure that inclusion does not mean exclusion for some groups of the disability community? Accessible tourism has gathered some real buzz over the last 24 months, but nearly every campaign or body seems to be leaving behind assistance animal tourists, most notably invisible disabilities. Having extensively travelled the country, 800,000 kilometres and counting, I observe discrimination is rampant. However, the changes businesses need to make barely involves much financial outlay and purely comes down to awareness and education in most cases. That is why I'm not sure why assistance animals are not being brought along the same as everyone else. If there are any operators in this forum, I promise you it's not scary or daunting to be inclusive in this space, provided the will to be inclusive is there. I absolutely agree with you. I just have an organisation rather than a person's name. We at Getaboutable definitely include the requirement for accessibility and inclusion of assistance animals and guide dogs when it comes to the work that we do in terms of improving accessibility and inclusion. Thank you so much for sharing your lived and professional experience. Did you want to put your camera on and speak any further about that, or do you feel that that covers what you wanted to say to the group to add to learnings today? No? Okay. And Adrian has made a comment, definitely worth a webinar on its own. There is a lot of confusion around assistance animals, and it would be great to bring more clarity to this issue. You're so right, Adrian. There is an enormous amount to understand in any single disability and a range of diversity and complexity. So what we're doing today is trying to have an introductory conversation. Yeah, the specifics around each disability and type and the complexities within a disability and the provisions for accessibility and inclusion need more time. I want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you to Paula for your time and sharing your knowledge and experiences. We hope that today's webinar has motivated you to start developing or building on your own disability action inclusion plan. If you would like some assistance or guidance on developing your plan, Get Aboutable can help you with our consulting services, guiding you on development of your disability inclusion action plan. If you're interested, simply drop us an email at the email that Manon has listed in the chat. And if you would like to learn more about how to improve the accessibility and inclusion of your business or organisation, don't forget the Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Conference in August, where we will not only be presenting topics like accessibility information, what you should include and how to make sure it's accessible, but also co-designing accessibility to ensure success, the what, why and how of co-designing with people with disability, inclusive marketing, how best to ensure authentic disability representation in your marketing and market to this large and growing segment, and a Q&A with travellers with disability. But it's a fantastic opportunity to connect and network. Just go to our website, so I'll put that in the chat as well. For more details about the conference, including how to buy tickets and accessibility information. You'll be making a fully captioned recording of this webinar available on YouTube channel, so keep an eye on your email for announcements when that is available. We run the Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Conference every 2 months. A conversation, every 2 months. We don't do a conference every 2 months. We do these webinars in 2 months with either a webinar or a casual networking event. So keep an eye out for an announcement about April's virtual event. Have a great evening, everyone. See you next time. I can actually see a couple of questions. I might just double back to them. Olivia, we're in touch with them all, but it's a very small community and most people are used to volunteering. I want to be sure that we're paying for their expertise. And Adrian suggested, Olivia, that perhaps you check an award rate for a similar role, such as a SCHADS award. Thanks so much, everybody. Look forward to the conversation at our next ACAP webinar. Good night.